This is The Bandwagon, a podcast about baseball and the best laid plans. I'm Hannah Keyser, a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports, joined as always by Zach Crizer, also a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports. Hello.
Hello. It's the last week of the season.
This is our last podcast that we will record in season. And part of what is relevant about that to the podcast is this goes back to the intro and our best laid plans. We thought we will do postseason previews and we will work our way down from the most likely teams to the least likely teams. And later in this episode, you'll find out that we thought a team that was most likely, or at least medium likely, has now been downgraded to semi-likely. So this is the last podcast we will record in which we do not fully know the postseason field. So we are going to tackle the teams that are left on the AL side of the bracket that could be in the postseason that we haven't dedicated a segment of the podcast to. And then next week, between when the season ends and when the wild card begins, we will do a podcast that tackles the NL side of the bracket. The reason we did that is because the AL side in some ways is more undecided because there's both a division title and some wild card spots up for grabs. But did I say AL there? I hope I did. Yeah, that was the AL side. The NL side is very crowded with mediocre teams. And I'm sorry, but I'm not dedicating a segment of the podcast to the Miami Marlins unless we absolutely have to. Does that reflect how you kind of feel about this? It's like there are more teams on the NL side that are like, I don't know. Do we need to talk about them at all?
Yeah, there is just very little chance that whoever gets the sixth NL playoff spot, that team doesn't seem likely to make a lot of noise. Whereas there are some
spoken like someone who didn't watch the 2022 postseason in which the Philadelphia Phillies.
I didn't say they won't. I said they're not likely to. But the AL side is both. I think the reason we wanted to do it this way is it's both high stakes. There's still a division crown. There's literally the Astros are involved when they go to the ALCS every single year. And B, this sets up as a really nice preview for the rest of the season. If you're going to watch baseball the rest of the season and you don't have a specific team you're rooting for, if your team's been eliminated, if you're in the New York area, say, you should watch the AL West race. It is.
Although if you're in the New York area, you'll be very tired if you do that.
Yes, it'll be very late at night, but that's okay. You stay up and wake up later. The
forget work.
Rangers, the Astros, and the Mariners are fighting each other, and also separately the Blue Jays. And that's the race we're going to focus on.
Yes. I'm going to put my husband on blast real quick. We were last night walking to dinner. He also covers sports, all sports, but is not going to be, say, traveling for the postseason, which I will be at some point. I'll also be traveling at the end of this week. We'll talk about that. We were walking to dinner last night, and I don't know what I asked him. I was like, how you feeling? I don't know. What's up with you? As if we didn't just spend like the past 12 hours together because we both worked from home on Mondays. And he said, sorry, Jake. He was like, I'm just really stressed about having to stay up late watching baseball over like the next month. And I paused for a second. I was like, are you making a joke? And he was like, no, I'm going to have to be up so late. And I was like, yeah, but that's not that hard, right? Sorry. I was just like, yes, it's true. If you want to follow the interesting postseason games, a lot of them will be on the West Coast. And that is hard for people, I guess. Not as hard for those of us who have to go to the West Coast still on East Coast time and cover them. But yeah, we're going to talk a lot of West Coast and then, again, also the Blue Jays. We have to, because this is like our last regular season episode, the most interesting thing in the regular season is still, I guess, the Braves and the many various individual, team-wide, historic marks they are hitting. I have a very big Brave story coming out soon. So I've thought a lot about the Braves lately and not specifically about what Ronald Acuna Jr. is doing on the field. So why don't you tell me about what Ronald Acuna Jr. has been doing on the field?
So Ronald Acuna Jr. became the fifth player to join the 40-40 club, 40 homers, 40 steals in a season. But of course, he didn't really join the 40-40 club in that he got like 40 homers and 41 steals. He joined a club that didn't exist before that he created, the 40-60 club. He might make it the 40-70 club. Just an absolute nutty season. that seems, he's still in a pretty tight race of overall value with Mookie Betts, but I think likely wins him his first MVP award. Definitely cements him as one of the kind of milestone players of this generation, I think. Someone pointed out that he and Ohtani actually won Rookie of the Year the same year also.
Oh.
And it feels like neither of them were actually at their full form then, and this year they have achieved that. Ohtani achieved his before also. But that just feels like in 20, 40 years, we're going to think about this Ronald Acuna Jr. season as emblematic of him, of possibly a whole generation of players coming after him who are aggressive at the plate and on the bases. I think the numbers are really impressive, and certainly him inventing his own club, which I wrote about a couple months ago, is impressive. I don't think you have to necessarily count the specific homers and steals to recognize that, this is kind of a paradigm shift season for him and for guys who are going to play like him.
It's sort of interesting to think about, is it a club if there's only one person in it? By definition, that's just you. You're not a club on your own. Can you be a club of one? I mean, in the baseball sense, you can. I mean, in the colloquial sense, is it a club if it's just you? I
think it depends on if you are advertising for more members. If you're trying to start a club, which maybe he doesn't want to start a club. Maybe he's looking to exclude everyone else.
Right. I that's what I want Ronald Acuna Jr. to say. I want him to be like, this is not a club. This is, you are not invited. This is just a thing I did to differentiate myself. I do not want other members. This is an extremely exclusive, not club. In the course of that, sorry, we shouldn't talk about like MVP voting, but you mentioned that you feel like he's going to win now. And I think the general consensus has weirdly shifted. And despite the fact that Acuna has not cooled off whatsoever, it kind of feels like people are leaning Mookie Betts now. Or the establishment's leaning Mookie Betts now.
I guess I don't know. I'm not voting, and I haven't polled the people who are voting, but I still would put it as Acuna being the favorite. For reasons that don't really. Yeah, this is one of those MVP races where you can't really say, oh, well, he's got more WAR, he's the winner. Which Mookie Betts has more WAR right now, by the way, because it's close enough, and they're both so extreme that you sort of have to choose your own adventure based on whatever intangible narrative factors you want. I rarely think that about MVP races, but I do think this one qualifies. And I think last year qualified in the AL, Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani, and the narrative won out. And I think the narrative usually wins out, as much as people want to say that everyone's beholden to WAR. Don't think that's true. Not really. And I think the narrative answer and the emotional choice often carries the day here. And Acuna has been so symbolic of the entire sport this year with the rule changes and taking advantage of the stolen bases and his breakout. I think he will win, but I wouldn't be gobsmacked if Mookie won.
Can I do a humble proposal?
Uh-huh.
A throwback.
Throwback to the video show.
Throwback to the video show, a humble proposal. I already did this on TV. Sorry, I'm repurposing content. But it was a few weeks ago. Okay, so my humble proposal is that now that there are virtually no rule differences between the two leagues and everybody plays everybody, it seems that we need to do away with the league differentiation between the awards, because why should, to use last year as a perfect example, why should Shohei Ohtani kind of not win an award and Paul Goldschmidt should, just because he happens to be in the right league or the wrong league, however you want to view that. However, we should not go down to one winner per award, because that's anti-labor, because a lot of guys have clauses in their contract. They get the extra money if they win awards. And instead, what we should do is introduce a gold, silver, bronze system for all of the awards and award the top 3 finishers across baseball, irregardless. Sorry, that was a malapropism on purpose. It's like a little bit of a joke. Regardless of league. Because we announce the voting now, because we have Baseball Reference and everything. It's like the the ranked voting is very available. And when you are looking at one particular player's, say, baseball reference page, you can see when they had a second place finish or a fifth place finish or whatever. But those are completely lost to history. And this year feels like a very good example of like it's a false dichotomy that you have to either think Mookie Betts or Acuña are having particularly outstanding seasons. And I just would rather have people tell me out of, say, Mookie Betts, Acuña, and Shohei Ohtani, how would you rank those three, kind of? I think that would be a more interesting experiment and a more interesting way to capture for posterity the way we view this season.
So, but that does eliminate one MVP award. If someone gets the silver MVP award, no one's going to really take it as the... Or are you saying they get the contract incentives if they get a bronze MVP?
Well, I'm sure they would have to sort of write the contract incentives, but I think that there are actually some contract incentives. I mean, the way that the Rookie of the Year voting works now in relation to the larger CBA and not like individual contracts in terms of like service time doesn't that it allows for like top 5 finishes or top 2 finishes?
I think it's top 2. Yeah.
Top 2 finishes. So right. So like we do have access to that information. And I think
we definitely do. Yeah.
Right. And I just think that is the information that that now that the leagues are so homogenous that there is no reason to not like front and center that information in a way that's like holistic and makes sense for how we are actually experiencing baseball, which is like who's having the most impressive season and who's having the second most impressive season, as opposed to like if you only looked at these 15 teams, who's having the most impressive season. How do you feel about
that would make things easier this year if we just got 3 MVP slots to work with, because that would be, it would be hard to order them, but the 3 would be apparent.
And I think that, and this came up so much last year with the Judge versus Ohtani, I think a lot of people, everyone who is sort of like smart said like, well, you don't have to choose. You can enjoy them both. And it's like, but you do literally have to choose. Yes. And having to rank feels different than having to choose, even though what the people who were choosing were doing was ranking. Okay, that's all. That's my humble proposal for how we can fix awards and do it for all the awards, not just for MVP. And also in this way, pitchers can get a top 3 Rookie of the Year finish, because as it is, people think of Rookie of the Year as analogous to MVP and not Cy Young. And in that way, tend to downplay rookie pitchers. Okay, let's actually talk about this AL West plus the Blue Jays race.
Okay, do you want me to run down the standings here?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so going into Tuesday evening's games, we are looking at the suddenly hot again Texas Rangers atop the AL West. They have won 6 games in a row and suddenly have very, very high chances of making the playoffs. The Astros are 3-7 over their last 10, including losses to very bad teams, the A's and the Royals. They're now 2.5 back of the AL West, and the Mariners, also struggling, are 4 back in the AL West. Now, all of that's just the AL West, and then you have to look at the wild card standings, where the Blue Jays are a game and a half up on the Astros. So the AL West bottom 2 are essentially fighting for one playoff spot and hoping that maybe the Blue Jays drop far enough that they can both make it. But so the Astros have the last AL wildcard spot right now, and the Mariners are a game and a half back of them. Luckily, they're playing each other right now. The Astros won game 1 of that series last night. Justin Verlander shut down the Mariners, and persistent Mariners problem, Yordan Alvarez, went nuts. So the Astros went up 1-0 in that series.
I'm not going to say you did a bad job, but I am going to say, in short, if that's like a tricky thing for people who are exclusively listening to this medium to follow, we have 4 teams for 3 playoff spots. The first wild card team is currently the Tampa Bay Rays, is likely to stay that. It could also be the Orioles, but they are way up on all of the other teams, sort of both of those 2 records. So they're going to get the first wild card spot, and the other one is going to win the AL East. So Rays, Orioles, both making it. Then we have 2 wildcard spots in the AL West title, 3 postseason berths for the Blue Jays, Rangers, Astros, Mariners. There you have it. Those 4 teams competing for 3 spots. One of them is going to win the AL West, and it's not going to be the Blue Jays. But in short, 3 postseason spots, 4 teams. We already talked about the Houston Astros because we were like, they're surely going to make the postseason, and now they might not. So go listen to last week's episode if you need a postseason preview primer reason to bandwagon the Houston Astros. But like, realistically, they're the team you least need me and Zach to tell you about because they're always in the postseason, which would make their not being in the postseason the most shocking thing to happen over the last week. But we're not going to talk about that right now. We're going to start with the currently leading the AL West, Texas Rangers. Like you said, they were bad and now they're good. Well, they were good, then they were bad, now they're good. And for some reason, them being good now feels so much more surprising. That sounds rude. I was going to say more surprising than when they were bad, but that's not true. It's not like I thought they were a bad team, but I do think that they got off to such a hot start, and it was like, oh my gosh, can you believe they're going to win the AL West? And then they were really bad for a little bit. And it seemed like, well, yeah, they're not going to go from like missing the postseason entirely to winning the division that has the Astros and the Mariners and the Angels. There was a time when we thought the Angels were going to put up a fight. That's all. Okay, so now they're back. They're in first. Were you surprised by that? Did I text you about this? I think I texted you about this.
You did. Well, I really didn't think the Rangers were going to be good coming into the season, so I would count this as less surprising to me than their original goodness.
Okay.
But I do think it's pretty impressive that they have bounced back with Max Scherzer on the injured list, with Nate Eovaldi not looking totally right after coming back from injury, even though he is pitching now. They've gotten, the stalwart has been Jordan Montgomery, probably the best trade deadline acquisition by anybody, I think. He's had like a 2.6 ERA since he got to the Rangers and has been overall excellent and going deep into games for them. So good job, Jordan Montgomery, and really good job, Rangers offense, because they have, which was really what powered them the first part of the year. And it's what has powered them recently. They got Adolis Garcia back from injury. They got Josh Young back from injury. They called up a guy you're going to talk about in a minute who's been hitting everything. So their offense has been crazy, and Marcus Semien has been really hot as they've taken this run back to the top. So they showed the potential for this. I don't know exactly how surprising it is that they did it right at this second, but right now it looks like they're the heavy favorite to actually win the division, which would have been true in May, June, and early July, and then not true at all for a couple months, and now it's true again.
Right. They are one of the 6 current teams that have never won a World Series, so that is potentially a reason to root for them. We just talked a lot about the Rangers without introducing the way that the conceit that we gave ourselves, which is that since we have 3 teams and that's not an even number, instead of splitting them up by person, you're going to give us one interesting stat about every team, and I'm going to talk about one interesting player for every team. But apparently we're first going to talk about the team just for a while back and forth, which we didn't plan on. So tell us the interesting Rangers stat.
Okay, my interesting Rangers stat. I wanted to really get at the way that they excel at hitting. And the Rangers are MLB's second best team. You can't be the first best at anything with the Braves. Just take that So the Rangers are MLB's second best team against breaking balls, batting .252 and slugging .431 against them. That's really good against breaking balls. Against fastballs, you expect teams to excel. Against breaking balls, you don't. And I think it's really attributable to kind of mirroring Corey Seager. Corey Seager has for years been the hitter that pitchers can't really attack well. I talked to Pete Fairbanks, the Rays closer, about Corey Seager, actually, and he was saying that if you do anything to just get the ball over, or if you make any sort of mistake, Seager is going to crush it. He is the guy who you can throw your best pitch, but if you throw it down the middle, he's swinging. He's not a guy who eliminates pitches. He just sits on a strike, and that's all the information he needs, apparently, is this a strike? And if it is, he will put it over the wall, in the gap, whatever. And the Rangers just have a lot of guys like that. They're not nearly as good as Corey Seager, most of them, but a lot of them do well against spin and do well at crushing things that end up in the zone. Adolis Garcia has been one of the best hitters in the league against sliders this year, which has really helped explain his ascent into a better hitter than he had been before. So I think that's, if you're watching the Rangers down the stretch or in the playoffs, something to watch for is when pitchers try to go after them with their best pitches, that often does not work against the Rangers. So I'd say that is the thing that I didn't see coming for them and that has helped them really leap into contention.
Cool. That's Zach with noticing numbers.
2 more episodes to go within this episode.
All right. You alluded to this. I am going to talk about the rookie, the Rangers' #1 overall prospect, according to MLB, Evan Carter, who they called up earlier this month. I actually really liked, Baseball Prospectus in their write-up of the call-up. So they were announcing that he got called up, which was September 8th. This is how they framed it. So this was the situation. The Rangers are in desperate freefall and just lost their cleanup hitter and all-star right fielder Adolis Garcia. Not ready to rely on Robbie Grossman, Travis Jankowski, or JP Martinez to fill that hole down the stretch. Evan Carter got the call-up just a couple weeks after a promotion to AAA. Now, what stands out to you about that is it's in direct contrast to everything we've just been saying, because that was written when the Rangers were in, quote, desperate freefall, and now the Rangers are not. Why? Well, we can't prove it's not Evan Carter because they've been really good since they called him up. He literally hasn't even played in all of these games, but they have been 11-5 since his call up. He has been incredible, which you mentioned. He has a 15-game on base streak, I think, that dates back to when he got. He has
only played 15 games.
He's only called up 15 games. He's played all of them. So I thought this was interesting. He kind of came out of nowhere as a prospect. We don't spend a ton of time talking about prospects because, as I say all the time, there's a lot of major leaguers to keep track of, and I can't know about everybody else as well. But he was the Rangers' number 50 overall pick in 2020. At the time, again, reading from BP, Carter wasn't considered anywhere near that caliber of a prospect. He didn't rank inside MLB.com's top 200 draft prospects and didn't even land inside Baseball America's ranking of the top 500 amateurs in the draft because he was a high school kid and his pandemic year got canceled and nobody got to see him. But the Rangers, with their scouting, they did see him. They liked him. They took him. And now he's been great. He was 1 for 3 with a single in his first at-bat in his first game, stole a base. Adolis Garcia is back and they've kept him in the lineup. So that's a testament to how good he's been. He is slashing .318, .426, .705. This was a good. Before they called him up, he was hitting .284, .411, .451 with 12 homers and 22 steals in 97 games with AA. And then they played a very small sample size at AAA, but did really well there. Doubles, 3 steals, blah, blah, blah. I like this quote from Chris Young, the Rangers GM. This was after they announced the Rangers were calling him up. Chris Young spoke to the media and he said, quote, "This will be the best pitching he's ever faced in the major leagues. And he's coming into a pennant race. I don't want any unfair expectations for Evan, but we're very, very excited to add him to our roster. We're very optimistic and excited about his future. And we think he makes the Texas Rangers better both now and in the future." I thought that was so interesting, just in contrast to what has literally happened, which is that all of a sudden they're really good and he's a big part of it. They were now don't get too excited, this is an injury call up and we don't want to put too much pressure on the kid.
Also, the savior is here.
So yeah, if he keeps hitting like this, he will presumably be in the postseason. And he was a nobody when they drafted him. And now all of a sudden he is, like you said, the savior of the possibly AL West winning Texas Rangers.
Yeah, I want to talk about one quick thing about Evan Carter. I don't know how much you've watched him. He is the thing you notice about Evan Carter, knowing that he's about to hit a home run on a highlight or that he does hit home runs, is he's very skinny. He is small. He is tall, but small.
Tall, but small.
And he reminds me, and maybe he will end up having the same career trajectory. That'd be great for him and the Rangers if he does, as Kyle Tucker, whose their names are also the same.
Yeah, same
Evan
flavor
Carter,
name.
Kyle
Same flavor
Tucker.
name.
Yeah, they're the same flavor. They could be swapped and still be a name. But he just feels the same way that Kyle Tucker did, whereas it's like, okay, he's got real power and knows how to hit. He runs really well, even though he doesn't look like a burner. He's not short. But if he adds like 30 pounds of muscle, he's going to get MVP votes. And it feels like that's exactly the path that Kyle Tucker took. And I would not be surprised if Evan Carter took that trajectory. But I don't know how much it is that those two teams just play each other all the time. And, it's like, maybe I'm comparing him to the lowest common denominator of things that he is near, but they feel very similar.
The BP write-up, I think that's where it was, compared him to Shaggy from Scooby-Doo in body type, which is a rare compliment for a professional. I don't even know if that is a compliment. It's a rare comp for a professional athlete. I agree. It feels like we're heading towards a big athletic feature where they talk to the scout who discovered Evan Carter.
Yeah.
So look for that this postseason.
The other thing I would put all my money on, within the next 3 years, there's going to be a February/March feature story on Evan Carter about how he bulked up this offseason.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and come back and look at the other two teams that are not the Astros or the Rangers. Okay. Next up, we're going to talk about the Seattle Mariners, even though they are the ones who are currently out of the postseason picture because they are also in the AL West. And then we will get to the Toronto Blue Jays. So the Seattle Mariners, currently 4 games behind the Rangers in the division, a game and a half back of the Astros for the last wild card spot. They're the only franchise that's never even played in the World Series, so that's a reason to bandwagon them, potentially. We're going to try to actually follow our own little organized setup this time, and I'm going to kick it immediately to you to give us a stat.
Okay, so the stat, and this is like a self-own. I have to criticize my own July take. But Seattle's bullpen, which was a strength before the deadline, has been even better since they traded Paul Sewald. They have a 3.34 ERA and an 81 ERA minus. Park adjusted, they've been about 19% better than league average since the trade, whereas they had a 3.59 ERA and were only 13% better than league average before the trade. And a lot of this is they have a deep bullpen. They keep finding new guys, and so far, it has not really hurt them to trade Paul Sewald. The guys that they've played, that they got back in that deal, Dominic Canzone and Josh Rojas, have not been like amazing, but they've been important depth pieces for a not so deep lineup. And Canzone actually has had several very large home runs out of absolutely nowhere. So I mea culpa on that deal, although I didn't love the deal, didn't think it was a great overall trade. It has not come back to bite them necessarily in this season, as they have, they've really had a roller coaster. They did really well in August. They've not done so well in September, so we'll see where it lands them. But if they miss the playoffs, I don't think you can blame it on that trade.
Yeah, I forgot that actually I did want to provide a little bit more context for where the Mariners are right now. The Mariners, their record in August was 778. They were playing 778 baseball in August, and they've been playing 348 baseball in September. So that's what's happened with them. They were kind of hanging around. Then they were like insanely hot, and now they have been just absolutely terrible. I watched a lot of the Rangers-Mariners series over the weekend, and I didn't know that I had such a vested interest until they were just getting swept by the Rangers. And I was like, come on, could you just win one of these games to keep everything like really tight and interesting going into the final week of the season? They came close. They had some really devastating losses, like would score 3 runs and then give up 4 and then bring the tying run to the plate in the 9th inning and strike out. So it was a tough look for the lineup. Okay. So you want to talk about the starting pitching when you talk about the Mariners, because it's been excellent all year. It's really young and homegrown at 30. Luis Castillo is the only starting pitcher over 26 and the only one who was not drafted and developed by the Mariners. And on the year as a whole, the starting staff is still first in WHIP, walks, hits, per innings pitched and 5th in ERA. However, now that the team has been bad, they've been bad. Or rather, now that they've been bad, the team has been bad. And they've not been terrible, but in September, they are 16th in ERA and 19th in WHIP. So it's kind of the wrong time to like talk about how exciting that their young pitching is. I hope that changes because I was thinking about writing that story when I go out and see them. So instead, we're going to talk about the catcher, Cal Raleigh, because he is both partially responsible for the pitching, which has been their number one strength. That is like why they are still here at all, but also has been really good offensively. I just think we don't talk about Cal Raleigh when we talk about like the catchers are good at hitting now kind of thing. There's like JT Realmuto and Sean Murphy. And I mean, like even Yanier Diaz with the Astros, like people are really pushing for him to be in the lineup more and catch more because he's so good at the plate. Cal Raleigh is really good at the plate. This year, he leads all catchers with a career-high 30 home runs. He also led all catchers last year with 27 home runs. And he's managing this very young pitching staff while also being very young. He's 26. I talked to him about this recently when they were in New York, and I was like, do they make you feel old? And he was like, I do wear a lot of New Balances. And then they're like, those are dad shoes. He complimented my New Balances, which is not why we're talking about him right now, but shouldn't go unnoticed. Yeah. Amongst all catchers this year, he's behind just William Contreras and Adley Rutschman for F-WAR. Should we talk about William Contreras more? Probably, but it's too late. People actually got introduced to him last year, so I don't necessarily know that I need to tell Mariners fans about him because he is Big Dumper, the drought buster. He's the guy who hit the home run last year that sent the Mariners to the postseason for the first time in decades. And I think, sorry, Mariners fans who are going to be like, this is the stupidest thing anyone's ever said. But I think at the time it felt like, oh, wow, this catcher who's like young, he's in his like sophomore year. He's the one who did it, but like actually he is one of their primary offensive contributors. Made a lot of sense that it was him. In that 18-inning game in which they lost to the Astros to end the division series, Cal Raleigh caught the whole thing. It's a lot of innings. It was 236 pitches total from 9 different pitches over 6 hours and 22 minutes. And then after the game, told reporters that he'd been playing with a broken thumb and torn ligaments in his left hand for more than a month. So he's incredibly tough. His catcher metrics are fine. 11th out of 64 in framing and 11th out of 64 in throwing. And we don't need to talk about the others because he's a really good hitter. That is Cal Raleigh. Big Dumper. Great nickname. Cool dude. Like and I was around the Mariners when they were in New York and somebody said something about how like that's a future manager right there. And I think they're right. And really early to call that. He's like a pre-arb guy. We're already like, he looks like he could be a manager. So
it's a great name for a manager too. That could totally be a manager name.
Oh, so true. All right. That closes out the AL West specifics part of this podcast. Back east, the Toronto Blue Jays are hanging around. And by hanging around, I mean they're currently have the middle wild card spot. They are really good, but they play in the AL East. So the Blue Jays have been pretty good this whole year, but they are not the top 2 teams in the AL East, and they're not the Yankees. So people haven't really been talking about them, or at least we haven't really been talking about them. And now here they are, one of the final wildcard teams. They haven't won a postseason game since 2016. Like I'm giving like a little backstory for all these teams, so I wanted to point that out. They've lost some postseason games since then. Haven't won any postseason games since then. And they're not playing any of these other teams over the stretch. So over the last week. So they don't control their own destiny, which is interesting. Who are they playing? They're playing the Yankees. Yankees and Rays. Oh, okay. Well, so people thought that might be interesting, but then it wasn't.
They do control their own destiny in that if they win out, they're fine because they are ahead of the teams right now.
Yes.
But they don't get to play the actual teams that they are racing. So
if you are on the East Coast and have to wake up early for work or something, but you're interested in this race and you're like, wow, this does sound compelling, you could just watch these games. You could just watch these East Coast games and start at East Coast times and then catch up in the morning on what happened out West. All right. Give us a Toronto Blue Jays stat.
So this is a bit of a Rorschach test or duck or rabbit situation with this stat. You can tell me what your impulse reaction is after I say this, as to whether it's good or bad for the Blue Jays. Out of 11 players who've taken 300 plate appearances for them, so basically all the hitters who have been regulars for them, only 3 Blue Jays are at or above their previous career average in terms of overall offensive production by WRC Plus in 2023. And those 3 hitters are Danny Jansen, Kevin Kiermaier, and Brandon Belt. So not exactly the core of the team, although they've all played big roles this year, but that's not who you thought coming in was going to be the stars of the team. What do you think of that?
I think, that's Brandon Belt's on the Blue Jays. That was what I actually thought when I saw that. I thought, oh, okay. And then I said to Jake, "Where's Brandon Belt play?" And he's like, "The Blue Jays." And I was like, "Okay, fine, never mind." And then my second thought was like, okay, well then I don't have to make Kevin Kiermaier my one interesting player, because I did know that he was having a very good year. Yeah, mostly what I make about that is like, I thought Bo Bichette was having a really good year, but maybe he was just having a better year than Vlad was having. I know Vlad is not having a good year, and we don't have a great reason for that. I don't know.
There's a lot of their main core guys. It's not like they've been terrible. This is going to be a more than a 90 win team. They've been fine, but they don't have anybody really going off. Matt Chapman started the year hot. Now he's sunk down to just around his normal, but below it. Bo Bichette also started off hot, has been a little worse lately and sunk below a very high career normal. But the point is, none of these guys are doing what you thought they might do coming into the season, when a lot of us thought, hey, this could be a team that wins the AL East, not one that finishes like 12 games back of the AL East. And you could view it that way of, oh, this is kind of disappointing. This young core hasn't really taken off in a year where seemingly, they could have stepped up and taken that division where the Yankees and Red Sox both fell back. But the other way to view it is, all of these guys are probably better than the record indicates. This could be a 22 Phillies situation where they get into the playoffs. They're actually better players than this. And I don't think it's unreasonable at all to think they could all hit better than they are hitting right now. And it might be just a matter of timing of it all syncing up. George Springer had a big hit the other day that, he really has not hit this year. Maybe he's rounding into form. All of these guys could get it together in some shape or form for some small amount of time and lead the way. The pitching has been the best thing about the Blue Jays, even though the young core of hitters is what everyone kind of saw coming as this team. So that's just, I think you could view that one of two ways, but I think it really exemplifies the story of the Blue Jays season being like disappointing right now, but maybe still good.
Yeah, this is like the win totals for the Blue Jays the last couple of years, just the number of games they've won, 92, 91, and then in the pandemic shortened season, 32, which was still above 500. In that time, have not won a single postseason game. They've been swept out of the wild card twice. Like it's the same energy as what you were just saying, which is you're like, there's no reason for them to not be a formidable team, especially come October when they have a lot of pop. And yet they have not been a formidable team in October. And this year they haven't been a formidable team sort of leading up to October, but maybe that's the year where it sort of changes in October. Okay, you mentioned the pitching staff has been a strength. I wanted to talk about Kevin Gausman, a player you should know because he's got the second highest pitcher WAR in the American League, ahead of Garrett Cole, behind only Sonny Gray. Should we talk more about Sonny Gray? We probably should, but it's the last episode of the regular season, so we're not going to. Kevin Gausman has been so good and so reliable, including this season. He has made pitch at least 170 innings in each of the last 3 years. Among the 104 pitchers with at least 300 total innings, sorry, that's like a lot of numbers, since the beginning of 2021, his FIP, fielding independent pitching, is second lowest to Spencer Strider. Because like you said, you can never be first when the Braves are around. But his ERA pushes him down to 16th. That is the Kevin Gausman story in a nutshell. His FIP is really good, and his BABIP, batting average on balls in play, is really bad. He is the unlucky pitcher. He's the if someone told you they were voting for him for Cy Young, then no, if you told your father you were voting for him for Cy Young, they would be like, what? He's like I actually don't know his record. It's like 8 and 9 or something. But he's been really good. The underlying metrics are insanely good, and he just gets super duper unlucky. He has the 3rd worst BABIP this year. Interestingly, Yusei Kikuchi, 4th worst. So maybe the Blue Jays across the board. It's just bad defense? Bad defense, maybe. Or at least very unlucky pitchers. Is the highest K percentage in the American League. 2 years ago, do you remember Robbie Ray won the AL Cy Young for the Blue Jays? And then they just kind of replaced him with Kevin Gausman. And it's like, oh, that was the right choice. Weirdly, it was the right choice to replace the Cy Young with somebody else because he has been incredible. You look like you have thoughts about Kevin Gausman.
I mean, I really like Kevin Gausman. Like, I like talking to him. He's an interesting pitcher to talk to. But I think the BABIP thing is... I have a theory about his BABIP. He throws his splitter just all the time. That's like what makes him really good, really interesting. He throws that splitter constantly.
And especially this year. I think it's like a career high usage this year.
And the thing about splitters is they're unpredictable. They don't really do any one thing. They do lots of things when you throw them. And I would wager that it makes it very hard to play defense against that pitch. If someone hits it, there's no great, like, well, everyone hits ground balls against this pitch or everyone pops up this pitch. No, I don't think there's any great way to guess what that ball is going to do when someone hits it. And I don't think it accounts for all of his BABIP issues. The Blue Jays outfield defense was pretty bad in previous seasons. It's gotten better this year because they made efforts to fix it.
This year it should be among the best, and yet 2 pitchers with like
still not
bottom 5 BABIPs. Yeah.
So I don't know the full reason, but I would bet that the same thing that makes him so nasty and so good at getting strikeouts might also be contributing to the dearth of defense played behind him.
I just think it's interesting. Like, we talk about like Spencer Strider as a Cy Young candidate sort of specifically because, he's got this incredible strikeout percentage. He's so dominant. He's so overwhelmingly dominant. And Kevin Gausman similarly, like Kevin Gausman's striking out batters 31.4% of the time. He's just, giving up a lot of hits when they do make contact. I touched on Yusei Kikuchi because he's also really unlucky. Also been really good. Like Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi both having really good bounce back years, part of that really good pitching staff that's doing well without Alek Manoah. How did you feel about Yusei Kikuchi saying that he would like to sleep 14 hours a night?
Okay, I will clarify for Kikuchi's benefit that he said he likes to do that on the nights before he starts, not every night. That would be a lot every night. It's a lot whenever. I'm pretty good at sleeping myself. I can sleep through whatever, but 14 hours is too many. That's too many hours. I think I would feel groggy and like I missed a day if I slept for 14 hours, or possibly like that I took drugs or something. I really don't know what it would be like to sleep for 14 hours on a consistent basis. So I felt like, wow, good for you, man. I hope that is working. I wonder, I mean, clearly the anecdotal evidence, he said this after he struggled a little bit with neck cramps during a start, I think, and he blamed it on only getting 10 or 11 hours of sleep.
Right.
So I would say he should try getting a normal amount of sleep, but the anecdotal evidence has clearly convinced him that's not the move.
I have so totally come around. Like, I enjoy the initial, that this played out the way that like mini little baseball news cycles always do, which is that like someone says something wacky in a post-game interview and then it goes viral. And then this time it was Stephanie Apstein who did some like follow-up reporting talking to him because it was like everybody's talking about this. And like the initial thing was everybody kind of like dunking on him. And then I was on SNY with Jerry Blevins and he answered first. It was like the same thing where they were like, how do you feel about this? And he answered first and he was like, well, you know, like as an athlete, I think recovery is such an important part. And I was like, oh, well, now I can't say anything bad about it because I am not an athlete. And I really have come around to being like, you know what? Like none of us are starting pitchers. We do not know how exhausting it is to be a starting pitcher. And perhaps 14 hours of sleep. Like maybe all the starting pitchers should be getting 14 hours of sleep. Maybe in spring training, we should ask all the starting pitchers how much they sleep before their starts. That would be an interesting survey. No, I feel bad that people are like teasing Yusei Kikuchi for this because it's like he has a very different job than all of us. And I am sure that job requires different accommodations. Like, right, he does this before it starts. How much does he sleep the other nights? Maybe it's like 6 hours. Maybe that's how he allocates his sleep in a way that works for him. I think about this a lot because like, this is going to feel like a stretch, but like pop singers talk a lot about the weekends for people who I'm pretty sure work non-traditional hours. Like they're always like singing about the weekend. And I'm like, what do you know? You're not off on the weekend. And it feels kind of like the reverse of that, where everybody's like, who sleeps 14 hours? And it's like people who work once every 5 days. That's who. Like people who have a very specific job schedule that requires them to be physically primed, but only occasionally. So that is my defense of Yusei Kikuchi. And that's the end. I don't have like a better way to get out of talking about this. Oh, yes, I do. I'm going to go see the AL West race. Sorry. That's what I should have ended on. All right. So right now, the Rangers are playing the Angels. I wonder how that's going to go. And the Mariners are hosting the Astros. So the Mariners had the most interesting schedule. They went 3 games at Texas, 3 games at home against the Astros, and then they have a 4-game series against the Rangers to close out the regular season. That's the one that I will be going to because I was like, oh my gosh, this is like many days worth of games that are going to end up deciding pretty much the entire AL bracket outside of like the Twins are going to win the Central. So I'm going to go to Seattle to see that last series. I am not good enough at the scenario playing out to tell what the possible ramifications of like a sweep in either direction are, but it's almost certainly, if not certainly, I could probably say certainly, it's certainly going to come down to that last series.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so the baseball regular season, if you're circling on your calendar, game 162 is Sunday. They play all of game 162s at the same time so that there can't be like, lineup shenanigans, whatever. They all start at 3 p.m. Eastern, roughly like 3:05, 3:10, but all within that range. And then Monday we have off, and Tuesday the wild card series starts. So if you are looking for the end of the baseball season, Sunday, if you're looking for our podcast preview of the postseason, you're going to want to watch for that Monday night into Tuesday morning. It will be there before the playoffs actually start.
Yes. And there are no game 163s anymore. There are tiebreaker scenarios. We did not get into how these 4 teams sort of stack up in a tiebreaker way, but I mean, honestly,
hopefully it doesn't matter.
Hopefully that doesn't matter, but honestly, it really could because they are very close, and the tiebreakers are not just games; they have to do with head-to-head records. But yeah, everything will be decided by the end of the day Sunday, and then we'll podcast Monday, setting up. Well, we'll focus on the National League side of the wild card picture because then the wild cards they start like right away, not right away, the next day on Tuesday. That's all we've got for you this week. Thanks to producer John for making the podcast look and sound great. Make sure you are following both of us on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, anywhere that people are being social. I said we, but mostly I'm going to try to post more on the socials in the postseason, promoting this podcast.
It is postseason now.
It is. And if you've made it this far, subscribe to the podcast, the YouTube channel, leave us a 5-star review, tell a friend, and we'll be back next week with another episode of The Bandwagon.